God morgon! Jättetrevligt att vara här. Jag heter Pekka Simula. Jag är VD till Herantis Pharma. Och vi fortsätter med läkemedelsutveckling. Och nu tänker ni säkert att alla finländare heter ju Pekka. Det är sant. Också vår ordförande heter Pekka. Men jag ska byta till finska, inte till finska. Jag ska byta till engelska. Men om ni har frågor ska jag gärna försöka ta dem även på svenska. So, Herantis Pharma toward clinical breakthroughs based on leading science. So, compared to the previous very interesting presentation, our drug development is still very different. We are aiming at real breakthroughs in challenging diseases, which means it's much higher risk, but on the other hand, as I'd say, if you don't try to do something very risky, you will never change the world. But first, quickly, where do pharmaceuticals come from? So a very quick introduction to drug development. When your doctor prescribes you with a medicine, where does that drug actually come from? Now, typically there is some science behind every innovation, and the more innovative the drugs, the more breakthrough science we are dealing with. So first of all, there is probably a scientific discovery on the mechanisms of a disease, or maybe there is a molecule that, based on its properties, seems suitable for a novel treatment of a certain disease. And then the very long-term, very much patient-requiring drug development actually begins. So first, you try to optimize the molecule to make it as drug-like as possible. Already kind of on the drawing board, try to make sure that it's safe, that it's suitable for human use, that its metabolism is appropriate. And then, then you'll start laboratory testing first. You'll go through extensive testing in cell lines, in disease models in the laboratory. You proceed to preclinical studies where you aim to convince yourself, convince the authorities that the drug is actually safe. And only then can you proceed to clinical trials. Years of clinical trials in which you first try to show that the drug is safe and then also show that the drug actually works in the treatment of the target disease. This all, of course, takes a lot of time, it takes a lot of money, but if you succeed, if the drug actually works, then you will have an international product, most likely with a very large market. And this is exactly what we do. Our strategy is that we take leading inventions, we patent them to make sure that we will have global rights to ourselves if the drug actually works. We base this work on leading science because it's been shown that the stronger the science, the better the probability of actually successing in the development. Then we do this tedious, very long-term development, spending a lot of money in the development, going through preclinical and clinical development, and eventually we aim to find partners, just like many small drug development companies, because in many cases, for instance, in Parkinson's disease, where we are active, the market is simply so enormous that a small company like ours would have a very hard time and would need to raise order of magnitude 10 billion kronor to take the drug all the way to the market. So it's always smart at some point to consider partnering with large pharmaceutical companies, which will both give you revenue, as they will start to pay you milestone payments, and they will start to invest in the most expensive late-stage clinical development. So that's our strategy. And quickly, på svenska, en sammanfattning på svenska, så vi är ett innovativ läkemedelsutvecklingsbolag med inriktning mot regenerativ medicin. Vi har 2 läkemedel i kliniska test, CDNF i Parkinsons sjukdom och lymfatin i sekundär lymfödem. Jag ska berätta mer om de 2 om en stund. Och vår aktie är nu listad i First North Helsingfors, men vi planerar att notera även på First North Sverige denna år. So, back to English and back to our drugs. So since the company doesn't have any revenue today, our drugs are still in development. From an investor viewpoint, we believe that it's most important to try to understand what the drug candidates actually are and how they work, what they intend to do. First of all, Parkinson's disease. Parkinson's disease is neurodegenerative disease, a brain disorder. It's the second most common neurodegenerative disease in the world, only after Alzheimer's disease. Anyone could have it. It's estimated that between 7 and 10 million people in the world have Parkinson's disease. It's also estimated that the amount will continue to increase over the coming years. It's a very expensive disease for the societies. It's been estimated that the annual financial burden of Parkinson's disease is about $50 billion every year. And amazingly, the standard of care is still L-DOPA or levodopa, a drug that was invented and brought to clinical use in the 1960s. So the same drug is still the standard of care 50 years later. It's a drug that, of course, gives a lot of benefits to the patients. Unfortunately, it doesn't stop the disease progression. So patients will not benefit from L-DOPA for the rest of their lives because the disease keeps progressing. So Parkinson's disease is actually caused by death or destruction of neurons, what we call dopaminergic neurons, in a specific region in the brain. So they are neurons that produce dopamine, and when those neurons die, the levels of dopamine in our brains will decline, and as a consequence, we can no longer properly control all our functions. The first symptom is typically shaking of hands or tremors or problems with balance as we fail to properly control our motor functions. As said, the known drugs can help the motor symptoms of the disease, but they cannot stop the continued death of those neurons. And that's exactly where we come in with our CDNF. So we aim to stop disease progression. CDNF, our drug candidate, is a natural protein. We all have it in very, very small amounts in our brains and in our blood circulation. And the natural role of CDNF is to keep neurons alive. As you know, we don't get new neurons after childhood. So it's very important for us that our neurons survive for decades and decades. And this is exactly CDNF's role in our body. It helps neurons stay alive. It does this with many different means, which seem to be very relevant to Parkinson's disease based on current scientific information. And it just doesn't help keep the neurons alive, but it also helps them recover if they have a problem, if they become stressed or injured. CDNF can actually help those neurons regain their function. And this, of course, would be really important in a situation like Parkinson's disease, where we know that the neurons are dying. This is These are data from a preclinical study with CDNF in a Parkinson disease model. So in this disease model, which was done in rhesus monkeys, the poor animals have a Parkinsonism caused by the death of most of their dopaminergic neurons. This slide here shows a staining where dark color indicates dopaminergic function in the brains. And there's very little dark remaining, indicating that almost all the dopaminergic neurons are gone. And after receiving 3 doses of CDNF once a month, so a 3-month treatment, there was a significant restoration of the dopaminergic function. So this suggests that CDNF not only can protect the neurons, but even restore the functionality of the neurons. And this observation on the cell level, on the neuronal level, was very nicely correlated with also behavior of these monkeys. So their gross motor function improved significantly, their fine motor function improved significantly, and for the first time of the world, also their non-motor symptoms improved significantly. This was a study done at the University of Pittsburgh in the US with a research group who is very much experienced in this Parkinson model. And they said that they have never seen before something like this, where the animals actually kind of became alive again. They started to look for food in their cages, they started to react to their caretakers, they became much more responsive after the CDNF treatment compared to the apathy they had before the treatment. This was of course very exciting and helped us tremendously to be awarded a significant grant from the European Union to move forward with clinical studies. This is a currently ongoing clinical study with CDNF in Parkinson's disease. We are very happy to also do it here in Stockholm. So Karolinska University Hospital is one of the 3 study sites involved in the study. Also in Skåne, Lund University Hospital, and then our local Helsinki University Hospital. The clinical study has now been fully recruited, so we have all the Parkinson patients in this study, and we expect the top-line results from this study roughly by the end of this year. So we of course look very much forward to seeing not just the safety, but hopefully also some initial signs referring to mechanistic activity of CDNF in these patients. Still, to emphasize, it's a first-in-human study. It's the first clinical study in the world ever done with CDNF. So from the regulatory viewpoint, the primary endpoint in this study is safety. Everything on top of that would of course be very exciting. In all brain diseases, a common challenge is how to get the drug in the brains. We have a so-called blood-brain barrier that protects our brains from any toxic or harmful molecules in our blood circulation. So this blood-brain barrier only allows certain substances to actually enter into our brains. And this is a common problem in brain diseases. Most drug molecules would be blocked by blood-brain barrier. This is also exactly the case with CDNF. So the CDNF protein does not enter the brain well enough through blood circulation. And that's why we are using in our first ongoing clinical study a device that's implanted in the heads of the patients, using which we infuse the CDNF protein directly in the brains. However, there's very exciting novel research with what we call the next generation CDNF. So a protein is a 3-dimensional structure, and we have shown that if we take a certain part of that protein, It retains the biological activity, so we still have the same effects in Parkinson's disease models, but also we result with a compound that actually enters through the blood-brain barrier. So we have shown that these next-generation CDNF compounds could be administered, for instance, subcutaneously. So the same kind of a simple injection that's used by diabetes patients to infuse insulin. So this is a very exciting next-generation product. Of course, it's still in the preclinical stage. It's still at least a couple of years from entering clinical studies, but with very exciting potential because beyond Parkinson's disease, it could also be suitable for the treatment of other neurodegenerative diseases. We already have interesting data, for instance, in stroke, in ALS, and some other areas. So that was our CDNF program in Parkinson's disease. As you all know, drug development is very high-risk endeavor always, and that's why we have thought it's also from the investor viewpoint healthy to not be just one asset company. So we have the second product in our development pipeline, which is Lymphectin gene therapy. Again, based on leading science, but coming from a totally different angle, so completely independent of our Parkinson's program. Lymphedema is a much lesser known disease than Parkinson's disease. The chances are that many of you have never heard of lymphedema. However, it's still a very common disease, and a picture tells you more than 1,000 words. Lymphedema is a result of some problem in the lymphatic system. So we have the lymphatic system whose role is to draw lymph from our tissues. And if there is some problem, for instance, as in this case, the patient has had breast cancer, and as a consequence of breast cancer treatments, her lymph nodes or lymphatic system in the axilla has suffered damage and can no longer draw the lymph from the arm. So as a consequence, the arm is chronically swollen. It's a permanent, chronic progressive disease to which there are no efficacious treatments at all. As said, it's also surprisingly common, and cancer treatments are one of the biggest reasons for lymphedema in the Western world. For instance, it's estimated that roughly 20 to 30% of all breast cancer survivors will develop lymphedema. It's a disabling, disfiguring disease. If you ask the breast cancer survivors, they will tell that having lymphedema is mentally as big a burden than the initial breast cancer diagnosis. Many patients get depressed. Many patients will be ashamed of their deformed body so much that they stop going out. They don't have clothes that fit them and so forth. And our Lymphectin is a gene therapy, again based on a very innovative research that aims to be the first curative treatment of lymphedema. This is really a textbook example of regenerative medicine. So we are aiming to reconstitute the lymphatic system. Here is the lymphatic system, and there is some disruption that cuts a certain part of the lymphatic system from the collecting lymphatic vessels. And the idea with Lymphectin is that a single dose, a single administration of Lymphectin expresses a human growth factor that's specific to lymphatic vessel growth. So when Lymphectin is injected in this damaged area, it will trigger the growth of new small lymphatic vessels, lymphatic capillaries. And then eventually those will mature into a functional lymphatic system. So we really want to correct the the damage in the tissue that's causing lymphedema in the first place. We have already completed a phase 1 study. We have proceeded to a phase 2 study. We're currently actively recruiting patients at 3 university hospitals in Sweden and Finland. Again, really happy to have Karolinska and Uppsala University hospitals involved in our clinical study. And we aim to recruit 40 patients in this study, 40, to be randomized in groups of 20 receiving placebo and 20 receiving our Lymphedema. There is a lengthy follow-up, a 12-month follow-up after we have completed the recruitment, because this is a condition where it will take time to actually see if we can improve, decrease the swelling of the affected arm in these breast cancer-associated lymphedema patients. So we expect that roughly end of next year, we should have the unblinding and readout from this clinical study. So just to summarize, we are a drug development company with 2 highly innovative, novel drug products currently in clinical studies. They are both targeting unmet clinical needs. Lymphedema in breast cancer-associated lymphedema, currently in a phase 2 study. We have expected or estimated that the market potential here is about 600 million euros, only in a very narrow first indication with significant potential to expand if Lymphedema actually works. And CDNF for Parkinson's disease, it's obviously a huge market. Currently we estimate that the market for CDNF could be about 1.6 billion. And the follow-up product, the non-invasive next generation CDNF with significant potential beyond Parkinson's disease in many neurodegenerative diseases. So we're targeting disease modification. This is not just drug development to help symptoms, but really disease modification. We really want to stop progression of disease or cure a disease. These are based on leading science. The underlying science has been published in leading scientific journals, and the company is fully funded to reach unblinding in these both ongoing randomized clinical studies, hopefully end of this year and end of next year. And we are, as said, considering a dual listing by the end of this year in Sweden. Obviously, in Finland, we are currently the only publicly listed drug development company. In Sweden, you have dozens and dozens, so there is a much more relevant peer group in Sweden. Just very quickly about our management. We have a strong international board of directors. We also have very happy to have a Swedish board member. The management has also actively been buying shares. We have a list of all insider trading on our website, and our last funding round was completed in March, and in that round the cornerstone investor was Swedbank Robur's healthcare fund Medica. Thanks very much for your attention.
Så, välkommen hit Pekka. Så ska vi ta frågorna på engelska eller svenska?
Ja, vi kan försöka göra det på svenska.
Okej. När jag tittade på bolaget så kände jag först att det var väldigt spretigt. 2 helt olika områden baserat på vetenskap. Det kändes som att du hade hittat något spännande där och så hittade du det där och så såg jag att ni har slagit ihop 2 bolag. Är det så? Kommer de här från 2 bolag?
Det är sant.
De här bolagen, hur kom det sig att man slog ihop dem?
Maybe I'll take this in English if you don't mind. So initially Herantis Pharma was a company developing CDNF for Parkinson's disease, and Herantis Pharma was the company developing Lymphedema for lymphedema. And we saw significant synergies in our teams. At the same time, with a lot of interesting similarities, because these both are biological drug products. So their manufacturing, scaling up, process development, and the regulatory processes. They have a lot of similarities. They require the same kind of expertise. So it was actually a very good match to bring these companies together. But of course, you could ask if at some point it would make sense to, if both advance well, would it then at some point, for instance, make sense to spin out one again and focus on the other? But this is a strategic discussion more in the long term.
Ja, vi pratar ju mycket om enproduktsbolag och det är många rädda för. Förfaller den så har bolaget ingenting. Nu har du ett bolag med 2 spännande projekt, så att faller det ena så har du kanske det andra. Så det är lite spännande att se att det är faktiskt 2 bolag som har slagits ihop.
Ja.
Jag måste bara snabbt fråga dig. Du nämnde, jag hörde här, du pratade om data från stroke och ALS.
Mm.
Vad är det CDNF eller vad var det för någonting?
Nu för tiden är det ännu vetenskapsinformation. Alltså vi kollaborerar ganska närt med universitet Helsingfors, och till exempel vår grundare professor Mart Saarma arbetar fortfarande vid Helsingfors universitet, och hans forskningsgrupp har intressant nyheter både i ALS och stroke och också några andra sjukdomar. Men det är ännu kan man säga tidigt, early data on these areas. Så jätteintresserad, men kanske lite för tidigt att börja en riktigt developmentprogram.
Men det skulle betyda att CDNF, som idag bara går mot Parkinson, skulle kunna fungera för indikationsområdet stroke?
Det är möjligt.
Okay.
Ja, det är möjligt. Och jätteintressant förstås.
Den här Next Generation X CDNF, jag förstår ju att ni vill ta fram någonting som passerar blod-hjärnbarriären, men är du inte rädd att man kan säga att den ökar inte försäljningen, den tar utav den redan injektionsbehandlingen, den som ges direkt i hjärnan?
Det är en bra fråga, och också kommer det lite tillbaka till ALS och andra neurologiska sjukdomar. Vid Parkinsons sjukdom är det bara dopaminergic neurons, alltså neuroner i en särskild plats i huvudet. Alltså det är möjligt att inducera CDNF precis på denna plats i hjärnan. Men då det gäller ALS till exempel eller Alzheimers sjukdom, då skulle du behöva få aktiv medel in the whole brain or even in the whole body. Och det skulle vara det skulle inte vara så lätt med CDNF som vi bara nu inducerar lokalt. Och där finns det en jätteintressant möjlighet med XCDNF. Därför att om vi kan ha det överallt i kroppen eller överallt i hjärnan, då kunde det också funka i ALS och Alzheimers till exempel. Alltså det är kanske mer så att CDNF är bäst för till exempel Parkinsons sjukdom och kanske Huntingtons sjukdom, men XCDNF kunde vara bättre för många andra neurologiska sjukdomar.
Och CDNF för Parkinson, skulle det vara en engångsbehandling 2 gånger eller 3 gånger? Är det botande?
Ja, just nu har vi dosering varje månad.
Hur länge då?
För 6 månader först, och om patienter så vill ska vi fortsätta på en andra 6 månader.
Så att 1 år tror du,
ja.
och sen är patienten botad?
Nej, vi tror att man behöver det för helt livet.
Okej, så det är en livslång behandling? Okay.
Ja.
Och den kommer då göras på specialsjukhus, för man injicerar inte hjärnan på en vårdcentral?
Ja, det är möjligt.
Okay. Så hur prissätter ni den produkten? För den låter ganska dyr.
Om vi tänker på Parkinsons sjukdom och att det kostar societies 50 miljarder euros, alltså 500 miljarder kronor varje år, så är det också möjligt att utveckla läkemedel som skulle vara djupare.
Okej. Du nämnde att ni funderar på att lista er i First North Stockholm. Hörde jag under året innan 2019?
Ja, det har vi anmält. Att det är planet.
Och kommer det bli en listningsnyemission i samband med den?
Det är möjligt. Det är möjligt, men vi har inte ännu publicerat någonting på det.
Okej. Sen läste jag, eller om jag lyssnade på dig, det kanske var en missuppfattning, men en IPO i USA.
Det har vi inte pratat om. Alltså naturligtvis varje läkemedelsutvecklingsbolag tror att i framtiden ska det behöva mera pengar, och då skulle en IPO i USA vara en naturlig utveckling. Men det är för tidigt att prata om det, tycker jag.
För ni fick ju ganska mycket uppmärksamhet här. NCBI listade ju den här Cell Transplantation-publikationen som er professor publicerade här i juni, augusti eller någonting. Om just CDNF.
Nu är jag inte säker på vad du pratar om, men
you had a publication in US on CDNF. Your professor and Herantis was mentioned.
Yes.
So you got a lot of publicity during this research. But was that more around the CDNF as a potential Parkinson?
Yes.
Okay, so not so much about the company, but
exactly.
more the... Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think that's also a good point. Are there any competitors in the CDNF area?
Well, we own the whole rights for CDNF, so that's fully in our hands. There is a relatively close kind of sibling protein, MANF, M-A-N-F, which is held by an American company, Herantis, but they are still in preclinical stage, so they haven't even started any clinical development. So in that regard, we are still very much the king of the mountain in this narrow field. But of course, in Parkinson's disease, there's a lot of attempts to improve the treatments, but actually very few seriously disease-modifying treatments are in clinical development. So there's certainly a big need for something like CDNF to succeed.
Yeah. Just was the last question on the lymphedema. Is that a one-time treatment to cure the patient?
That's what we hope at the moment. But of course, once we have the data from the clinical study, then we will know much more.
Yeah.
But in this clinical study, yes, it's a one-time treatment only.
Yeah. So then the patient is cured, and you are in phase 2 with that. How do you thought about health economics and pricing that product?
Yes, it's also known that lymphedema treatment is fairly expensive. In the United States, there's published data showing that breast cancer survivors who have lymphedema are between $10,000 and $20,000 a year more expensive to the society than breast cancer survivors who don't get lymphedema. So it's also an expensive lifelong maintenance kind of disease. But we haven't announced any price points at this stage, so we believe it's a bit too early. We first need to see if it actually works.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks for your patience with my Swedish.